Welcome back to Worm Watts, where we harness the God-given power of compost worms to transform organic wastes into amazing living fertilizer. And we're back in our red wiggler bin. And as we open it up, we can actually see the condensation there. This is one of our usual checks when we open up the bin, just to kind of get a gauge of how the moisture is. And as we dip into the bin, you can actually see right over there, we got a worm in the corner. And there's another worm right over here. The mat, the worm blanket itself, looks nice and moist, which is really a good sign. And under the surface, we've got quite a few worms hanging out there. Sorry, let me get you focused in so you can see them all scurry away from the light. But I'm really happy with the way this is looking. We've got really nice activity there. And so I'm gonna go ahead and pull away this worm blanket. Oh wow, before I do though, I'd like to get our focus on this worm here who appears to be enjoying this area. Oh, and there's another one right there. So we've got a couple worms actually on the worm blanket. And that looks like a pill bug, also known as a roly-poly. So I'm glad to see that the worm blanket is becoming nice and hospitable to our bin residents. And so I'm gonna go ahead and actually just take off the worm blanket and try to find a nice spot for it to rest while we take a look at the bin. Just set it on the edge here. All right. And looking into the bin, you can see the leaves, the leaf portions of the last feeding from the pineapple. And then right here and over there, we have little portions of the cantaloupe. And it's really neat to see. You can see that they've really taken care of just about all of that. That's a nice sized worm right there. And it disappeared underneath that leaf, as you would expect them to do when exposed to the light. And even picking this up, you can just see how paper thin the skin of the cantaloupe is, which is a really neat sign that the microbes and the worms and all of the other decomposers in here are working together and quickly getting through the material that we fed them. So I'm gonna dig a little bit further down to see what things are. Wow, got worms right there. As you can tell, it doesn't take very much digging to run into some of our bin inhabitants. And the moisture level is really nice throughout the bin. You can see even here just a little bit of material disturbed, and we've got worms galore. So they are all throughout the surface. Right there, I don't know if you can see it, there appears to be a worm right there, right where my finger is. And it seems to be a very young worm, so the way that you can tell that you have a worm that is extremely young is the fact that the worm will not have a clitellum that is like visible. You can actually see more of them. There's another one right there. They look like little translucent strands of spaghetti. And they glisten because of the moisture of the worms. So it looks like we're really having some good reproduction there, which is really encouraging. And this really just goes again to further the idea that I've had that winter is a really fantastic time for your worm bin to really grow, because you don't have some of the other pressures that you do throughout the year of pests. And wow, just digging into this is nice and moist. And look at that. You can see how moist it is, that it's really sticking to my fingers. Not in a bad way, of course. And as we dig even further down, just all throughout the bin, it's this nice and moist. And I just want to point out that this was a bin that we corrected the moisture on fairly recently. So it's been about, I think maybe about 4 weeks or so since we corrected the bin moisture level, and it really seems to be helping in here. Previously, I used to be able to pick up chaff, which is one of the brown materials that we used in here, and at that point, the chaff was distinguishable. But at this point, I really can't make out the chaff against any of the other materials. And the chaff would just come off of my hands, and my hands would remain just basically clean. But as you can tell now, that is not the case. So I'm gonna have to actually wipe my hands off on this worm blanket that we have here. But that is just a good sign of the moisture being in a good place. Now this bin could probably use a little bit of a feeding again, because all of the items that I can see have really been digested. So I wouldn't mind adding in a little bit more. Adding in a little bit more food. So let me look into that. All right, I was able to locate some additional food to feed to the red wigglers. And as you can see here in this adjacent bokashi bin bucket, we've got all kinds of little food waste here. It looks like some potato there, a bell pepper, all kinds of little stuff there. Salad greens and items like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this little bowl here to scoop up some of that. And I'll just place that just like that on the surface. I'd really like to go for this potato because I feel like it's going to be a nice appetizing item for them to eat. And as you can see, it is actually just breaking down really nicely, which again, realize that this is a potato here, and it was, as you can see, I did my best to cut at it so that it would break down, but it just goes to show that the softness of this really just proves that the fermentation is really breaking down or pre-digesting rather is a better word. It's pre-digesting the food and making it a really nice snack for our worms here. So they're able to get into that and get started on that pretty readily. So I'm not really too concerned about burying this food waste quite as much as I would be in the spring and summertime. So I've got some potato right there. I've got some more here. I've got some of these salad greens here and some more potato over there. I'm gonna go ahead and add some more still. Let's add this whole bell pepper and see what they do with that. And then let's just go wild with this. And part of the reason for this is I'm really hoping that soon this bin will be ready for me to split and begin a new bin of red wigglers. And so I'd really like to get them nice and fed and so that they can really multiply effectively before we try to then take some from this population and begin a new bin. So I feel like I've fed very well. The moisture of the bin is enough that I'm not hoping to add, like not hoping to spray it down necessarily or anything like that. But I will be adding in some grit to assist with their digestion. All right, and the grit that I'll be using is this crushed eggshell here. I've added this to the bin on multiple occasions, and I haven't really commented on it very much, but it does seem to really get worked through fairly well. The worms seem to definitely go for it and distribute it throughout the bin, and I don't end up coming back to the bin and just seeing loads of undisturbed crushed eggshell. It really seems like the worms, as they traverse, are really utilizing the eggshell. So that's another good sign. So this is where we're going to leave the bin this time. And this is actually one of the worms that came off of our blanket, off of our worm blanket. So we're going to go ahead and tuck that back in there so that we don't lose any of our population. So back that goes. Oh, wow. Actually got a runaway, actually. So this is going to be my first time actually picking up one of these guys. Just roll them over and there we go. Transplant him back there. But they can move. They got it moved along pretty well. For their sake, I am going to spray the top of the bin, or the top of the worm blanket, just to make sure that they're able to navigate that effectively. Oh, lost another critter outside. It's a roly-poly. Definitely want them to be inside the bin. So I'm just gonna put that guy back in there and make sure we don't lose any more. So yeah, we value every member of our bin community, and we want them all to thrive in here. So I'll probably try to get a little table or something, another type of surface to a dedicated surface to put this worm blanket on for next time. But the worms seem to be doing very well, which is amazing because it is quite cold. I imagine, of course, that it's warmer in the bin, especially with the food that we add. That also helps with, oops, sorry about that. That also helps with adding further temperature. Look at that thing stretch out. You can actually see the, I'm trying to get a good shot of it, but you can actually see the stripes there as it navigates the little triangle in the top of the bin. So we'll just go ahead and set that down, and nice thing is that guy will be just fine, and we'll probably get right back into the bin where it belongs. So thank you for joining us as we worked through this bin and as we put those guys back to bed for the night. For those of you who don't know, this bin has actually been named, and this bin is actually, this is our only red wiggler bin at the moment, and her name is Rachel. And the reason that we called her Rachel is because of the biblical story of Jacob and how he ended up getting tricked and getting his first wife being Leah, Rachel's sister. And then he worked 7 more years to actually marry Rachel, whom he loved. And the reason that we named this bin Rachel is because we have several other bins that are European nightcrawler bins, and I was under the impression initially that they were red wigglers. So I, like Jacob, got tricked, and so we've called this bin, the true bin of red wigglers, we call this bin Rachel. And I look forward to being able to take red wigglers from this bin and be able to multiply them into other bins. So I hope you join us on our journey as we get to build out new bins and see the red wigglers process food waste, transform it into fertilizer, and multiply. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.